Welcome to this meeting. We are a team of consultants. Will present our findings in our attempt to untie the Gordian knot that is the garment industry in Bangladesh. We address the MNCs who source their garments from Bangladesh.
We're going to ask for a do-over. Imagine yourself being the CEO or board chairman of Gap, a clothing company, Levi, Walmart. Just imagine yourself being garment retailers, and you're using Bangladesh as a place where you source your material from. So imagine yourself as either an American or European retailer, and we are going to be presenting to you about the ethical nature of doing business with Bangladesh. So we'll be going through a series of slides, a number of different findings, all three that you've asked us to do, and that's where we're going to be starting from. So, Hari, please start again.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now that the stage is set up, I'll start with a brief story. On my way to Tucson, I was sitting on this flight, and we were on the runway. I grew thirsty. But since we were on the runway, I couldn't be served water. I was told I would be served when we started cruising. And as luck would have it, we got delayed. And I was there on the plane parched for over an hour. And then I thought back to all the tons of readings that I'd done about the workers who were deprived drinking water for long working hours. And I asked myself, did I feel that pain for that moment? And I ask you, can you connect with that thirst that they experience? So why do we all hear about this Rana Plaza and Bangladesh all of a sudden? What are the incidents that brought this to light? The incidents that led to Rana Plaza were ignored. Before that, there was the Zin factory fire, and before that, there were a number of other incidents that killed over 700 people since 1990. Although the situation is grim, we treat this as a window where we can endeavor to make changes for the working conditions of the people in Bangladesh. Now we have to ask ourselves as businessmen, can we let this continue? What happens is we allow business to continue as usual. But when we reflect upon the situation, the industry is changing, so we cannot allow business to continue as usual, where we firefight our problems away. We have to be preemptive. And in examination of the relationship that the various stakeholders play in Bangladesh, we will reflect upon how this allows the business to run as usual and how we can change it for the better. The perception that we have at present is the MNCs are the bad guys. But we do not know who lurks behind the scenes, the real person who is responsible for the plight of the laborers. That is the middleman. And we'll learn later that he squeezes the profits out of the system of the supply chain. Having said that, we also need to understand the fact that the MNCs are responsible for vetting the people they do business with. So just a lack of knowledge or lack of cognizance does not allow them a free path. Now the business problem that we see here is inefficiency in the supply chain. As I've already mentioned, the middleman squeezes a lot out of the supply chain, and the retailers, the MNCs, and the factory owners have very little to gain out of it. So we propose that we bring about some efficiency, some changes that will help the factory owners as well as the MNCs bring about changes in the business that would help them absorb the increase in labor costs. Then again, from business perspective, we ask this question, do we want to invest in Bangladesh? Is Bangladesh actually needed in this case? And the answer is a resounding yes. Why? Because Bangladesh has over 5,000 factories. It has huge volume capacities, and its supply of labor is abundant. It is skilled, and it is at the lowest in the region. And according to McKinsey, Bangladesh is still number one, and there's no replacement for Bangladesh at present. Now, having established the importance of Bangladesh, what role can the West play in Bangladesh's development? If we talk about economic progression, we understand that Bangladesh is at a cusp where it's growing very rapidly. And the West, having already gone through these events, should be able to lend a helping hand in this development of this important partner. If we are to draw parallels with the West, in 1911 there was a factory fire in New York, the shirtwaist factory fire, which killed 146 people. If we draw parallels, it was also a garment factory. The people working there were very poor, the wages were low, the conditions were abysmal. But there was a huge hue and cry, and changes and regulations started to emanate from that. And the basic things that we see today, like not blocking the fire exit, fire extinguishers in every corner, having sprinklers in the room, all those basic amenities started being regulated after that incident. But if we draw a parallel with Bangladesh, the situation there is still abysmal. So what we ask is this learning to be transferred to Bangladesh, which is a very important business partner for the West. Now, why should the MNCs care about fixing this problem? We've established that just because they do not have any liability legally, they cannot raise their hands and say we are not to blame. Because having partnerships with the middleman and the factory suppliers who maintain these working conditions, and the knowledge that the MNCs have of these working conditions makes them culpable. And another thing, if we see it from business perspective, an increased safety would motivate the workers. It would increase their efficiency, which results in increased profits. Now, if we look into history, what we are proposing is nothing new. Change has happened. As we see from the slides, this is a sea change in the approach that Nike proposed in the CSR system. And this was full, both of these statements were made by Phil Knight. And in a span of around 15 years, we can see what changes Nike had brought about. Now we shall look briefly into the financials of this matter. The regional wages. This slide presents a comparison of that. And as you can see, Bangladesh has a monthly wage of $68. Now, what does $68 mean to you? Just to put it in perspective, $68 can buy you 3 pairs of pants from Walmart, or 17 Big Macs, or equivalent in Bangladesh, or just 13% of your laptop. That's just to give an idea of how low the wages are in Bangladesh. And this $68 value that you see is after 77% increase in the aftermath of the Rana Plaza disaster, which goes to say that in the future, near future, it is unlikely to grow. Some important fast facts about Bangladesh: the location, the population, but most importantly, the size of the garment industry. It contributes $20 billion to the national GDP, which is roughly around 17% of the GDP. And it is also an important source of employment, which employs 4 million people. That amounts to around 40% of the industrial employment. Now, for the MNCs, it has a range of options, what you can do, how they can act. The first is do nothing. Second is bear the cost, absorb it in the system. And the third is transfer the cost to the consumer. But as we see, the situations have put the MNCs in such a awkward position that they are walking on eggshells. any small incident in Bangladesh would have significant repercussions as far as public opinion and the mounting pressure on regulations is concerned. Therefore, the path of least resistance should be the choice. And in that respect, it would be ideal to bear the cost. Now, not only is this a sustainable option for them, it will also reflect positively on their brand image. But having said that, how do we achieve this? Where does the cost come from? So we propose this funding increase, and there are 5 options. The options is pass the increase to the customer, absorb it and take a hit on the profit. Absorb but transfer that to the supplier. Force the supplier to absorb the increase, or work together with the supplier to increase their efficiency and enable them to absorb the cost. And as per us, it is very difficult to ask some of the retailers to change their business models. So telling them to increase their efficiency in supply chain or to vertically integrate the supply chain is very difficult business-wise. Hence, we propose that they work together with the suppliers and the factory in order to increase the profit. Now, what this does is it checks all the boxes of all the stakeholders, and they're all happy. Now, how does improving efficiency help? This is some of the data that we got from a working paper by Doug Miller called Capturing the Profit. This goes to show the SMV, which is the standard minute value required to produce each different type of garment. If you consider men's formal shirt, it should take ideally at working at 100% efficiency around 22 minutes to produce. And if we work at 35% efficiency, which is the norm in Bangladesh, you require 63 minutes to produce the equivalent shirt. And the same if the efficiency is increased to 75%, it requires just 28 minutes. Now, if we consider the $68 monthly wage, it works out to be $0.34 labor charges per shirt, as opposed to 0.15 when you're working at 75% efficiency. So there's a 19-cent saving per garment, and this will contribute to a higher margin, which can be used for making better working conditions, providing incentives. Now I pass it on to Cecilia.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have heard of a company called Lee and Fung? Well, they are actually the largest middleman in Bangladesh, and many of us haven't really heard about them in connection with the Rana Plaza events, but they have actually played an important role. Just to see the facts behind this, the Google search records only 3% for Bangladesh middleman web hits than that of Bangladesh Fire. So it's really not much in our consciousness. Middlemen are known to be important stakeholders in the wage suppressions, being a communicational barrier between workers and retailers, and having large power in setting business standards locally. This is the Lee and Fung logo. They are a Hong Kong-based company, and it is actually probably the most important company in the Bangladeshi garment industry, and which most American shoppers have never heard of. They are an insulating layer between MNCs and workers. Their buying power trumps MNCs, and they are known to notoriously depress wages. It's really interesting to look at their revenues, which is $20 billion recorded for the last year. If we recall Harry's slide about the GDP income through the garment industry in Bangladesh, it's also $20 billion, which is 10% of their GDP. So it is a staggering amount. It's in comparison, for example, GAP recorded $15 billion revenue last year. So it's really, we are talking about a huge amount. If we look at the $22 gigant example, we see that Li and Fang makes the most profit, and they are important players in setting working conditions by earning $3.15 as opposed to MNC's 60 cents. As a result of the factory fires and the collapses in Bangladesh, a fund was set up in the aftermath, which aimed to achieve $40 million. Unfortunately, out of this, only $15 million has been achieved. So it's unfortunately, changes still don't seem to be happening in helping working conditions and compensating victims. There is a legally binding commitment, though, by a code where each firm has to contribute with $2.5 million to upgrade safety conditions. At the moment, it looks like not many people care, but there is actually huge potential in caring about and making a real difference. By setting a standard and leading changes, as MNCs, we would create a brand value and a value for customers, which could never be achieved through standard marketing. Through acting, and being a leading example, it would be much easier to achieve a sustainable growth and a higher profit than by mere marketing.
Thank you, Cecilia. So now for a little bit of the good news. Li and Feng does a very important role. As mentioned, it's an insulating layer between the factories and the multinational corporations. It's enabling the two companies to do business. Unfortunately, though, aside from all the services that they do provide, they are soaking up the profit in the middle. They are depressing the wages on the factories, and they're pushing them further into debt, and likewise, they are shrinking the margins for MNCs. Now, in this respect, this is going back previously, in this respect, all the liability seems to be limited because there's no direct connection between the companies and the factories, so Rana shouldn't have any real implication. But truth be told, it does. Now, what we are going to stress with you is that the legal liability that you have is limited. It's not foolproof, and you have to be concerned because previous examples, Walmart has sent their own people to inspect facilities. In doing so, they gave them a red card. The red card signified that they failed to pass their basic safety requirements. 2 months later, Rana collapsed. The red card that they gave to was to the Rana Plaza. Now, they gave them the red card, which said they failed. They failed because they didn't meet Walmart's safety standards, probably based on American standards. Now, how we're connecting this is that misfeasance is what is happening now to the Rana Plaza owner. He's in court right now facing charges. What we have to worry about is non-feasance. This goes to say that you failed Rana. You failed several other factories for not fulfilling safety requirements. You knew that they didn't meet your standard. By knowing that, by failing these people, you are unfortunately bound by a non-feasance tort claim. So you're not off the hook. You may think it's in a different country, but there has been precedent set that foreign countries are suing multinationals. And the stinger about this is both the United States and Bangladesh are civil law systems, which goes to say once there's a precedent set, the precedence was set with the triangle shirtwaist fire. Once that has been set, the door is open to further lawsuits. So moving on with that, what we did was create a matrix of opportunities. 3 different approaches, both positive and negative. What I would like you to look at is the most positive one, making change. If you make change through CSR, you will be in a position that helps you get away from liability. If you are seen as being an enabler of good governance and good business, you can help mitigate your risk of liability. So in doing so, what we're suggesting is creating opportunities for the factory workers and also creating and working with legislation. By creating legislation, you're creating opportunities for yourself. You're helping to move the conversation in a way that you want it to go to. So whatever is favorable for you, which could include a small wage increase, but also could include limitations on the percentages that middlemen can make, can help you in your business practice. So our conclusions, some of them not so surprising, is that the garment industry is important for Bangladesh, but equally important for MNCs, both European and the United States. It's a symbiotic relationship that benefits both countries in the fact that, as we saw, Bangladesh is the least expensive manufacturer. There's no other place that you can go. You can't go to Vietnam. You can't go to any parts of sub-Saharan Africa because they're not ready yet. Vietnam is, but it's more expensive. So is it the question of just preparing to move on, or is it a question of creating a long-term relationship? Likewise, the best move to make is mitigate your responsibility. Just because you move to a different country doesn't mean that you're going to see no responsibility in the future if the same thing happens. So if you create a legal system now and you're consistent with it in the same country, you know that you have a track record and you know that consistency will help you do business. And to close with our conclusions, what we have is the cost of doing business versus the cost of helping a factory update its facilities. We're using GAP as a point of reference. GAP makes about, in revenue, $4.1 million per day. The cost of a renovation of ALIF, garments industry, $110,000. So you look at those 2 different opportunities, helping a partner or not helping a partner. You damage your brand image, or you help your brand image by helping a partner. These are the 2 things that we've concluded from this. So our recommendations are as follows. And what I really want to do is focus on number 1 and number 6. We have them listed in our opinion, order of priority. The middleman is making the most out of this, but they're doing the least. The middleman is just connecting 2 different parties, and they're reaping the benefit. It's not their name that's on the line. It's the Gap that's on the line. It's Levi that's on the line. It's Walmart that's on the line. You're bearing the risk in this case, and you're not being rewarded for it. The middleman is making $20 billion in revenue. That's as much as a country, that's as much, or if not greater, than the Gap. So what we're suggesting is renegotiating your contract to have more favorable terms. Lastly, what we'd like to point out is creating a more cooperative environment between the factories and the MNCs. There are such practices in place where the debts are paid at a slower rate. By not asking for upfront payments, the factories can reinvest in themselves, pay their workers a little bit better, and by sharing that burden, you share the risk, but you also diversify the risk. It's the basic idea of any kind of diversifying your portfolio. When you diversify, you're lowering risk in general. And that's our 2 basic points that we'd like to point out. Similarly, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them now. But if not, I would like to close with a quote from Gandhi, who was a man far from business but very wise in his dealing with people. And in doing so, in his opinion, if the further we move away from our moral standards, the further we move away from treating each other with equity and justice. And if we lose that foundation and we do business without any morals, we are looking to undermine ourselves in the future. So in closing, business with ethics is not a far reach. It's possible, and I suggest you take these suggestions into consideration. And at that, we will close.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we will have 20 minutes to interact with you in our role.
Would you mind if we got a little water?
Not at all.
Water?
Especially with the opening you gave us. Ready to begin the 20-minute segment?
Yes.
If I may, I'll just ask the first question. I hear what you're asking of us, and I worry about the competitive implications of it if my competitors don't go along with it. Is there a way to eliminate this middleman function, since it seems to be the source of all the evil?
There has been precedents in the industry. If we take the example of the kiwi fruit zespri, which you may be aware of, that comes from New Zealand. There was a similar problem because of the disparity between the suppliers and the buyers, like big buyers like Tesco, who had the clout. So in order to mitigate that, a cooperative was formed, which leveled the playing field and gave them some significant power in order to negotiate the terms and conditions of the contract. I think if we take a learning from that and make a similar cooperative society where all the factory owners and suppliers come together, then the role of middleman disappears.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So you're saying that there has been success in renegotiating contracts before, that we were saying?
I'm saying the formation of a cooperative would greatly help in negating the role of the middleman, because in that case the ease of business would be established. Right now what the middleman is doing is it's functioning as a pipeline between the suppliers or the factory owners and the retailers. The retailers are using them because they find there is no ease of doing business in Bangladesh. So if there is some facilitating agent who helps them achieve this contract signing and putting together the suppliers, because the suppliers are spread out and they are small. So if there's a cooperative society that can help them put together all these suppliers in one spot and give them a one-stop shop. So I think that would help them eliminate the role of middleman.
What are our competitors doing?
There's no competitive advantage anymore of being in Bangladesh so far as competition is concerned. It makes sense to go there because there's profit, because a pair of pants is inexpensive as compared to doing it, let's say, in the United States now, or in Japan, where it traditionally was done, or Korea or Taiwan. Bangladesh is now on the map for everyone. So you cannot do without them. You cannot really leave Bangladesh and expect to get anything better so far as the quality of workers and so far as the cost of the workers. So competitive advantage is going to come down to your consumers. The Gap was boycotted immediately after the fire because they were deemed being the evil multinational corporation, depressing the people, but that's not necessarily the case. It is not them dictating terms to the factories because they're not in contact with the factories. The way this works is that the Gap would say, I want 1 million pairs of jeans and this is my cost. Li and Fung or any middleman would say, okay, we understand how much you want. We'll take that to a factory. We'll let them bid on it and we'll take the lowest bid. So if you're saying I want to pay no more than 15 cents for a pair of jeans, Li and Fung is aggressive on driving down even a couple pennies, because a couple pennies on 1 million pairs of jeans goes in their pocket. So as the Gap was willing to pay 15 cents per pair of jeans, Li and Fung can negotiate 13 cents and still get 15 cents. So it's a 2-cent profit for them. That's what they're doing, and that's what you should get away from. Dealing directly with people who are inflating the cost and not doing as great a service as they maybe once did. There are possibilities now of creating your own arm and creating these co-ops in which there's much greater efficiency and transparency in the process.
Who would be part of the co-ops? Would it be like different businesses?
In Bangladesh, they make everything from hard goods to soft goods, from clothing to pottery. So it's going to be a variety of different industries. There's 5,000 different factories, and you can imagine that's 5,000 different voices. So under that, you'd have to get some sort of governance in place in which either districts or industries can band together to create some kind of voice to make this work. It's not in place right now, but in the long term, it does make sense.
When you talked about the financial prospects for all your decisions, you are actually pitting a very small cost that they will need to be incurring versus some amount in the future. But I doubt the certainty of reputation actually benefiting them positively in a financial sense. I mean, you were mentioning Gap being boycotted. I don't really know, empirically speaking, if the boycott was directly attributable, or is there just an association between A and B, you know? I think I as a board member really need to see better relationships between the factors that you identify before I make any big decisions. And the other thing that gets me is this idea that I have been unethical. I mean, I'm a business that tries to handle how many thousands of stakeholder groups at any given point in time. The very fact that I attempt to listen to them already has to be seen by people as my attempt to be ethical. In fact, my presence here demonstrates my desire to be ethical. So for somebody to tell me, hey, I'm being unethical, is not helpful to me.
I think it is helpful. I can quote you the example of IKEA and some Scandinavian clothing companies like Marimekko and some small boutique designers which are very popular in Europe, and they pride themselves of being sustainable, and they create value by this. And I, as a customer, I shop at these places because I know that the workers who have been hired to manufacture these products live in decent conditions, and I create value myself as well as a customer. So there have been success stories, and I think IKEA, for example, is one of them. They are known to be ethical.
Coming back to your first point about quantifying the impact of this goodwill, according to a study conducted by Reputation Institute, in the 15 major markets, 73% of the respondents said that they would recommend a brand who is actively participating in CSR.
How about the reverse? Would they boycott somebody who isn't? I think that would be the interesting question to consider.
Okay, that brings me to the second part of your question. Like, if we consider the fact that you are dusting off your hands by saying that you don't know the difference between right and wrong, that makes you amoral. And people who, okay, let me complete the argument. Let's see if you see the point I'm getting at. Knowing and ignoring, that makes you immoral. But what there's no option of being amoral, immoral here. The fact is that you know and you have an action, you have an obligation, because the industry is today moving towards sustainability. There is a trend. People are moving from being purely for profit towards becoming a social organization. Why does Walmart have so many regulations on suppliers? Because it has identified this trend, and it has taken this preemptive stance that they can, by becoming an industry leader, they can make changes in regulations that can suit them. Why has Nike done so in the past? They are identifying these opportunities that if they are the leaders and not the laggards, they can have a bigger say in the regulations that come into picture. So by doing that, you are putting yourself in a better position. If we consider the corruption laws in FCPA, if you have standards in your system already inbuilt and someone does something wrong, you are not penalized as much. So by putting these regulations in place, what you are doing is safeguarding yourself from possible litigation and possible liabilities. Why do we want to wait for these regulations to come into place in the first place when we can safeguard it before it happens? So all we are asking is being preemptive.
I would just like to ask you, have you ever heard of fair trade coffee? Have you ever heard of organic cotton? And have you ever heard of green dry cleaning? These are all things, well, green dry cleaning uses cleaner chemicals. These are all things that came into play within the past 10 to 15 years. It goes to say that there are consumers who are concerned, whether it's about chemicals, whether it's about fair treatment of workers. So, is there a market for it? Yes, there is.
But I think, and very briefly, before I forget this, the real problem here is the consumer trend for faster fashion trends. The problem is people don't want clothes that last too long because they want the fashion trends to be adaptable to whatever it is that they want to wear. And therefore, the clothes have to be dispensable, they have to be cheap, and they have to be within a certain price range. That forces the company to make sure that, I have to only be able to sell it at a particular price, which then forces everybody else down the chain to work within the parameters that I set. So, I mean, am I really being unethical if the customer says, I want clothes that are more fashion sensitive, that have to be cheap, and can be made of very expensive fabric?
That's understood, and we recognize the fact that it generates from the consumers. But we are not asking you to suppress your margins. What we are trying here is you can, by introducing some efficiency within the system, you can still maintain the margins. In fact, you can have better margins. So you don't have to sacrifice any part of your profit.
To just twist that a little bit, perhaps it was us misspeaking saying that the MNCs are immoral, but I think our findings show that it is the middleman who's really driving this conversation. The middleman isn't adding any real value. Again, we've never heard of Li & Fung or FNL. These are two supply chain companies that are taking product from Bangladesh and putting it into the West. All they're doing is basically serving as an interconnector, but they're also serving as negotiators on behalf of the MNCs. They're driving down the cost, and they have been quoted as saying that they have been influential in globalization. They're not taking accountability for it, they're just saying that it's a fact of the matter, that the costs are becoming cheaper because they are better interconnected. So, are we saying that Nike or Walmart are immoral? Not at all. We understand that they're chasing a profit, and we're not asking consumers to consume less because that's how the money is being made. However, is there room to share? Yes, there is. Because if it takes an example of 90 cents to make a shirt, the extra 10 cents that has been negotiated out is the difference between having a safe facility based on volumes, based on the number of units sold times that dime difference, having a safe facility or having a facility that collapses. It's one dime that they found makes a difference between the two.
Well, I'm going to compete with my colleague over here tomorrow, but today I share his skepticism about this, and let me put it, I think this is consistent with what he's saying. I go to Bangladesh, and the only game in town to get connected to factories appears to be Li and Fun. And they must have some kind of monopoly on the middleman role. So if I'm going to get my products, I got to work with them. Why is it that you expect me or my colleagues here to do the responsible thing? Why isn't the government of Bangladesh stepping in and saying we don't want a monopoly on middlemen? You know, something similar to antitrust behavior in other countries.
One thing that we did suggest was creating your own branch, developing the competency to source outside of the United States or in far-off countries, whether it's, I shouldn't say just outside the United States, you might still be getting VCRs from Japan, probably from China by now. But creating the competency is a step that is not a groundbreaking precedence. There are companies out there that are deciding not to go further with companies like Li and Fung and creating their own branch of sourcing. Bangladesh is different. They rank very highly or lowly on the Corruption Perception Index. Out of 175 countries, there are 163. So this is not a place where you just go and expect everything to be on the level. There is suppression because there is corruption. But that doesn't mean that you should continue to accept these policies just because that's the way it is. It takes external pressure to make change, and this change is coming through such actions as the Accord. The Accord is asking any company that does business in Bangladesh to fork over 2.5 million to help people, normal people that in different circumstances we would consider neighbors, friends, or brothers, to help these people have better working conditions that would include breaks more than once an hour, that allows them to drink water more regularly, that allows them to work in conditions where it's not so cramped or so hot. These are the basic things that we take for granted because we suffered, not we, but the United States suffered through. We learned from it. We have so many regulations that have been enacted since the 1970s based on the EPA, based on workers' rights, based on gender equality, that we take for granted now that this country does not have. So we're suggesting lending our expertise. We're not giving the money, we're not donating, we're lending experience, we're lending the practice to let them take it and install it. Until they actually go through this process, we're going to have this conversation, and it could get worse. It could be a point where there's not just 1,000 people, but 2,000 people. It could be 10,000 people because it's a poisoned river that's due to a dye. This is why Nike got out of the business of polluting like this. They got away from being liable for all these actions in places such as China, these small towns that were willing and ready to take this business because it was the only business, but they decided to do it in a more ecologically friendly way. So they are setting the best practice, they're setting the standard, and there's another opportunity now, not in a first world country such as China, but in a third world country such as Bangladesh. And if you do that there, if you break the precedents, I think you will be rewarded much longer for doing good than for saying we're a white sheep and a white cloud of white sheep. You can be the black sheep that bucks the trend.
We have 2 minutes remaining.
Perhaps I would like to add that the UN has been involved in making changes in Bangladesh without that much success. So we think the real stakeholders need to make a change. So governmental and public organizations are important, but it's us businessmen who need to make a change.
Do you have any final remarks? Do you have enough water?
Thank you.
Quick.
Just to end on a note, something to tie the closing quote that we saw. Like that was a person far removed from business, Mahatma Gandhi. But what would someone closely related to economics and business say? And if we talk about Adam Smith in his book Moral Sentiment prior to The Wealth of Nations, he stressed on this fact that how fundamental moral foundation is the spirit of benevolence, the spirit of contribution, of service. And if we allow our economic systems to function without these basic moral foundations, we will end up in a society that is amoral, if not immoral.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we'll take 10 minutes for feedback where the judges step out of their roles and just talk to you like persons who have heard a good presentation and want to give you feedback about it. Colleagues?
Go ahead.
Anybody? I think you did a really good job. Good presentation skills and good slides. I think there was probably a lot more on the slides that you could have focused on that would have, I think, engaged us a little bit more. I don't know how many specifics on yours you wrote down, but I think you did a good job. I would be more interested in hearing about how the positive brand image would benefit us financially, from a CEO perspective. You really want to know how it's going to hit me in the bottom line. How are we going to benefit from this financially? So. Anybody else?
Well, I liked your presentation. I thought the topic itself was well chosen.
Yeah.
And it's clearly fits with the purpose of this competition, and it lends itself to tripartite analysis very nicely. I thought you commanded the facts in the Q&A very nicely. I mean, it was clear that you'd done your homework. I have a little complaint about the slides, not because of their accuracy or their relevance, but because there was too much coming at me at once. I thought you tried to pack too much on a slide, and by the time I started to read and I was trying to listen to you, and I think your presentation would have been more effective if you'd have been more concise on the visuals. And that's not easy to do, I realize, but it carries more punch to a group if the zinger that you're trying to get across is what shows up on the video, and some of that surrounding information can get filtered away. Mm-hmm. Too many trees, we need more forest, if you will. And I think, but that's a skill that takes time to develop.
We have had much more information, so we have a tough time trying to reduce it.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job. I just really think that the slides could have carried a little more punch in terms of what is it you want from us, and you anticipated that we were going to get our backs up a little bit. Naturally we would. I'd rather be accused of being amoral maybe than immoral, but I don't know. Maybe both of them are bad enough. You tried to offer us a way out of our sleep.
Consultants.
But that's just about presenting. And, any other feedback?
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed your presentation. I thought the topic was very on point and very interesting. I thought it was interesting how you, in the very beginning, kind of interrupted Harry and kind of reset the tone.
I just wanted to address the question.
I like that, though. It was on point, and I thought that it did kind of bring us back to the frame of mind of where we're supposed to be in terms of our roles. I felt like when I was asking the question about the competitors, I don't feel like the answer I received was necessarily like the one I was looking for. I was looking for more of, so if I'm at Walmart, what is Gap doing? Like, what kind of steps are they taking? So I just wanted to express that piece, but overall, excellent job.
I actually want to piggyback on the presentation issue. The most useful thing you could have done was in the beginning tell us exactly your conclusion, because that would have at least framed your whole understanding, and that would have at least made it clear in our minds what we were going to expect more explanations for. Maybe 2 or 3 points for what we should be thinking about. Your introduction with the emotional aspect was very, very good, but you have to accompany the emotion with something that I can latch on intellectually, and I was trying to listen to that, and maybe because there was too much information still from my perspective, I did not really see as a listener exactly what you wanted me to take away immediately. And unfortunately, when you present to audiences like business people, they don't really have that much time because they're thinking of too many other things. So making the message, stand out immediately is very, very important. The other question I have is, how do you view the relationship between the legal, the financial, and the ethical dimension? How do you view them coming together? Because the way I saw your presentation, you presented this, and then you presented this, and you sort of try to tie them up together at the end. If you view them really as one integral business decision that has these different dimensions, then you could have tied your answer and you could have tied your presentation far better, I would think. Because I was observing your recommendations. You gave 3 different occasions for the recommendations to be presented. And as a listener, my question is, okay, at the end of the day, if I were to be told at the end that this was the recommendation, how did the 3 previous presentations lead up to that point? You get what I'm trying to say? I mean, there has to be some better way of integrating the legal aspect from the financial aspect, from the ethical aspect, because really, if you think about it, all business decisions have ethical consequences and have ethical principles behind it, and talk about the character of the business. So I think the better question for you to have asked was, how is this a good business decision? Or how could have I given the people listening to me a good business decision that encompasses the legal dimension, the financial dimension, and the philosophical dimension that we traditionally ascribe as ethical?
There were a lot of options whenever you could say, here's my decision and here's why you should make that decision. Kind of a little bit more pointed.
Right. And directed. And that, if you're able to do that, that tells me as the listener, hey, you really think that a good decision is one that is financially sound, legally compliant, but most importantly, ethically defensible.
Yeah, I agree with, sometimes we get trapped into this idea that I've got to save my recommendations to the end once I've made my case. But if you let the cat out of the bag at the beginning and then come back to it at the end, sometimes that can frame it for the listener even better. I remember the days when professors used to put these transparencies up on a screen, and they put a piece of paper over it. You're not allowed to see anything. You know, that's the power of the professor is moving that piece of paper down. And but that's really not the most effective way to communicate. I don't know why we didn't realize that, but. On the positive side, there were some of your slides were knockouts as far as I was concerned. I mean, the ones where you had the little box come up and draw our attention to the relevant financials. I thought that was very effectively done. And so I wouldn't want you walking away thinking that your PowerPoint was defective. I mean, I just think it could have been refined a bit more, but you had a lot of good stuff going on there. So. Anything else, colleagues? Well then, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry there was confusion about your start time.
Yes,
Just a reply. Your question was the first question. Could you re-ask it if you remember what your first question was? Because I wanted to say, my response to that was, the science is a soft science, and I don't know why I want to say that right now.
I think it was more related to have other companies, or how do we go about, renegotiating contracts that have happened?
No, at least that's that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't recall it. Question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You might want to, what did you do? Load it onto the computer? You can erase it, or you can do what you like. You won't need it.